big diplomatic news and the big news in general is it looks like the United States is moving in a at least semi-rational direction. What we're referring to here, reports are that a United States-Russian Federation bilateral military commission, or at least military talks, are in the works, for Syria. And this has been the subject of multiple phone calls between Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, one of our favorites on this program, and this guy we have, John Forbes Kerry. Note the Forbes, of course, of Skull and Bones and all the rest. But at this point, you can see how bad things have gotten here. The Skull and Bones guy is actually the lesser evil in the U.S. government. If it's a choice now between Kerry and, say, Samantha Power, or worst of all, the ISIS czar John Allen, then Kerry seems to be representing at least a semi-rational point of view. And indeed, this may be the personal efforts expended by Lavrov to try to create some sort of common field of reality between himself and Kerry. In other words, it may be a triumph of Lavrov's intelligence over the terrible heritage that Kerry brings to the table. Anyway, we may soon have this going on. So that is an amazing development. Now, obviously, what do we have to do? This also gets us then into the question in Europe, right? We're getting all sorts of people in Europe coming forward with this idea that they want to break with the U.S. line, which is correctly seen as bankrupt and destructive. And it is especially dramatic right now because of this refugee crisis, right? The wave of 1 million refugees or more already on the roads, moving on the oceans, many getting killed, but pressing forward. And then the United Nations report that says there's going to be another 1 million refugees coming towards Europe. Now, as of about last weekend, Saturday to Sunday, after the broadcast, we began seeing that in particular the German government, and this starts with the German Defense Minister Ursula von der Leyen in the CDU, and then Frank-Walter Steinmeier, the foreign minister from the SPD, and then, of course, Madame Merkel herself of the CDU. And the common line was, we are turning to Russia. If we're going to stop this civil war in Syria, which is obviously the main thing producing the refugees, right? It's ISIS and the civil war. It's Nusra, Al-Qaeda, terrorists, killers, butchers, right? Who wouldn't run? Anybody in his right mind is going to run, and devil take the hindmost. So if you want to stop that, the U.S. effort over 1 year, thanks to the sabotage of ISIS czar John Allen, who is responsible for this wrecking operation, we know what it is. It's the policy of phony war. Phony war means you pretend to be at war with ISIS, and frankly, you're not. This is what the French generals did and the British generals did with Hitler in the winter there of 1939 to 1940. It was a big nothing. It was a phony war. And, of course, the phony war is a continuation, with other means, of an overall policy of the appeasement of terrorism. That means having the ability to wipe out large terrorist concentrations and not doing it. That's what we heard from Lavrov over the past week. Lavrov pointed out in a speech, I believe, last Sunday night on the Sunday Times television program. This is not the British newspaper Sunday Times, but the Sunday Times television program. So maybe it's something like one of these blab shows here in the U.S. on Sundays. We had Lavrov coming out saying that the American command knows the location of large concentrations of ISIS butchers and refuses to attack them, refuses to bomb them. And one gets the idea, also prevents others from doing so, prevents others from taking on these groups of terrorists. So that's the phony war, and that's the appeasement, and that's Allen up and down. And, of course, Samantha Power. It is, as usual, the unholy alliance between the neocons, and, of course, Allen, representing the Petraeus Allen neocon generals clique, power-hungry, insubordinate, restless, contemptuous of Obama, lots of racism thrown in there. We heard it all, right? We heard it from General McChrystal, right, how they would make dirty jokes about the president and the vice president. And, yeah, okay, but unfortunately it's not just the locker room where we hear this stuff. They bring it into the policy arena, and that we cannot and will not allow. These generals, we ought to have some equivalent of Limoges, right, to limoger a failed and defeated general. We have plenty. There should be some town where you send them and they get to give courses about what they did wrong, and certainly not get rich in Wall Street like our dear friend Petraeus. So it's all going on. It's moving towards a denouement. Now, let me, before we go any further, let me point this out. Russian President Vladimir Putin will be in New York City, we believe, on the 27th of September. That's it's about 9 days from when we're recording, and it's going to be 8 days from the first time you're able to hear this. So we got about a week to get ready. I think it is incumbent on the American people, or better yet, incumbent on the organic intellectuals of this American people. Somebody has to speak for them. This government we have does not speak for the American people, still less does the opposition. The opposition is even worse, this Republican fascist clown show that we've seen. We need to provide a worthy and decent welcome for a benefactor and friend of the United States, and that's Putin. In that great tradition that goes back to Tsar Alexander II and the Russian fleets coming to New York Harbor in September of 1861, and then in San Francisco in October of 1861. We have got to show that the American people are not represented by their lunatic elites who are bankrupt, desperate, flailing, and very specifically the foreign policy elite has gone bonkers. There's this Washington groupthink. They have a psychotic narrative. They say, well, at the beginning in Syria, there were these nice peaceful demonstrators, but then evil Assad came along and started shooting. This is absolutely delusional. It is nonsense. There never was a peaceful phase in Syria. The shooting began back in the 1980s. These butchers got a bunch of military cadets in an auditorium for their graduation, locked the doors, and killed every one of them. That was in the early 1980s, and it never stopped. So enough with this crazy narrative. More details on the welcoming of President Putin in just a minute. And here we are back with our second segment of World Crisis Radio. It's Friday the 18th of September. Let me recommend that you pay attention in these tempestuous times to Tarpley.net. Tarpley.net. It is rocketing up in popularity. We've gained about 130,000 places on the worldwide list, according to Alexa. This is undoubtedly due to the new institution of the daily briefing. So now we have something every day, new stuff every day on Tarpley.net. And thanks to all of the listeners in the United States, but we'd like to thank Austria. We'd like to thank Great Britain, Canada, other places that have been so kind as to take some interest here in my work. And now's the time for the big geopolitical and world historical harvest time. A lot of this effort can now be turned into actual changes in the course of world history and institutional changes that will last. So the lunatic narrative is there was a peaceful phase. There never was. Those guys were the Muslim Brotherhood. They were killers from the very beginning. But then Assad spoiled everything when he started shooting. Now, remember, as people in Homs told me, people who had been dodging bullets with their children, fired by these lunatics, bearded lunatics firing from rooftops, those guys were foreigners. They were brought in from everywhere. A large group was brought in from Libya. Those were not even necessarily Libyans. In other words, the CIA secret army that was based in Benghazi against Gaddafi in the year 2011 was shipped from Libya to Turkey. We know it. That's what poor Ambassador Stevens was doing when he got killed. He was meeting with a Turkish official, his last official act before the assault on this Benghazi diplomatic facility began. And they were coming from all sorts of places, from Chechnya, from Saudi Arabia, from, above all, Darna in Libya, but from Morocco to Indonesia and from Chechnya to Somalia. Every unemployed killer could get bankrolled by the Saudis, and that's what they did. And the Turks made it possible. They allowed that border to be open, and they still do. And everything, all of this idiotic debate in Washington this week ignores the fact the simple thing to do is cut the enemy supply line, close the Turkish-Syrian border. And if they won't close it on the Turkish side, then you help the Kurds to close it on the Syrian side. And that will be the beginning of the end of the vaunted caliphate. But that's exactly what Allen and these characters do not want. They want to use Daesh, ISIL, ISIS, Islamic State, Caliphate, whatever you want to call it. They want to use that against Iran. They want to use that against Russia, in Chechnya, and places like this, in the Caucasus, Transcaucasus, and so forth, right? In Dagestan, all these areas. So they're doing that. Let's get back to Putin. Putin is coming to the United Nations on September 27th, we believe, according to The Hill, reliable congressional watchers, but politics in general here in D.C. Putin is likely to address the United Nations General Assembly on the 27th of September. Now, let's see what he might be doing. Thanks to Thierry Meyssan, the world has gotten, and we have been pleased to add our helping hand to Meyssan and the Voltaire Network. We just had the conference of the Collective Security Treaty Organization. The American media have never told you what that is, right? CBS, NBC, CNN, Fox, forget it. They have never told you what the Collective Security Treaty Organization is. Well, we have the Organization of American States for Latin America. We have the African Union for Africa. We have the European Union for Europe. We have NATO for the North Atlantic, or better yet, not even NATO. We have the Helsinki Accords, the OSCE. That's a better way to put it. We've got ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and so forth. Organization of American States, I think I said it. But now we have a CSTO, Collective Security Treaty Organization. This is successor states primarily of the former Soviet Union. And they had a summit, their Security Council of that regional organization, which are explicitly provided for in the UN Charter. Russia, Belarus, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan are now offering and urging the United Nations Security Council to accept their offer of deploying peacemaking and peacekeeping forces to Syria. And this comes in the light of 1 year of failure by the U.S., who could have clobbered ISIS, but didn't because of the wrecker Allen and his network, right? That's the ones who cook the intelligence. The reason they cook the intelligence is to hide what they're doing. American people probably not too happy to be so soft on ISIS. Well, you have to hide that. You hide it behind a bunch of rhetoric, and that is what has gone on. Therefore, Putin is coming with a mandate from the Collective Security Treaty Organization, and he's coming to the United Nations. Now, he's going to make a speech to the United Nations General Assembly. And we have a couple of reports on what this is going to be. A highly reliable Middle East source tells us the following. Putin will most likely be in New York on September 27th through September 30th or thereabouts. On one of these days, I think the 27th, he is reportedly planning to deliver an address which will condemn the unilateral economic sanctions by the United States and the European Union as measures which violate international law and violate the United Nations Charter. 2, Putin will call for a worldwide military coalition against ISIS, and it means a serious coalition, a fighting coalition, to shut them down, to wipe them out. Yes, it's unfortunate. It's like saying, Hitler had been built up by the appeasers in Britain and France. Fine. But once he's standing fully armed in front of you and coming at you, you got to defend yourself. And that's what it is. A worldwide military coalition against ISIS. And he will talk about the Donbass, right? The Donetsk People's Republic, which I had the honor to visit, and the Lugansk People's Republic, and also about Syria. On September 30th, we are told, since Russia is the rotating chair of the United Nations Security Council, Putin he'll come to the session himself, act as chairman, and will announce the commitment of the Collective Security Treaty Organization against ISIS with or without the United States, right? Because whatever the U.S. has done, it has not really been approved. Putin is going to say the CSTO and Russia can do the same thing. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So Putin is coming to town, and friends of this broadcast and other groups, I'm sure, will be a part of it. We want to have a worthy and respectful welcome for someone who must be considered a benefactor of the American people. Why so? Well, you may remember 2 years ago, we were on our way to general war in the Middle East over this fake chemical weapons fraud provocation, which since, for the Republicans, if you watch their debate, that Ghouta chemical weapons thing has entered into their lunatic version of recent history. It's a complete fraud. It was obviously done as a Turkish-Saudi co-production. What we've learned, we always knew it was the Saudis. We knew it was not Assad. Thanks to Seymour Hersh. Two articles by Seymour Hersh, if you haven't gotten up to date on this. Seymour Hersh wrote 2 in the London Review of Books. No American-controlled rag would take it. The ones that he usually writes for, I guess the New Yorker, whatever his traditional dwelling place is, couldn't do it, had to go to the London Review of Books. And we find out that Obama he not only knew that it had not been Syria, he knew that it could not have been Syria based on the monitoring of Assad's office that the NSA was doing at this point. So we were about to have a war, and finally Kerry shot his mouth off about, well, if they gave up all their chemical weapons, that would do it. And then it happened. And Lavrov and Putin picked that up. So did you want another Iraq war? Isn't it worth thanking somebody who made it possible to avoid that? It's true. Our own leaders are so incompetent. We have to appeal to foreign leaders to get any hearing at all. So I say let's do it. It's going to be a historical occasion. Here we go. Putin will be chair the session of the United Nations Security Council on September 30th, and will say the Collective Security Treaty Organization, including Russia, will now deploy against ISIS with the attempt of destroying them, and we wish to cooperate, but if necessary, we will go it alone, just like you have so many times with your neocon unilateralist idiots. How about this? According to a highly reliable Eastern European source, Putin's first speech to the United Nations General Assembly in 10 years will be a landmark presentation rivaling in importance his legendary address to the Munich Security Conference, that is to say the Wehrkundegesellschaft Conference in Munich, Germany, February 2007. They're still talking about that one. That's when we had warmonger McCain in the front row practically bursting a blood vessel with apoplexy about the obvious, simple things that Putin had to say about the non-viability of a unipolar world. It just doesn't work. No shame, right? No disgrace. Just doesn't work. The source described the draft text as consequential and incisive. Well, if it's going to be incisive, that's going to be highly interesting. So here's what I propose. I ask all persons of goodwill, friends of this broadcast, or anybody who can hear this, help us to have a welcome demonstration for Russian President Putin, friend of the United States, benefactor of the United States, more than our own elected officials. Our own officials swore to protect the United States. They didn't. Obama was about to start bombing. To Obama's credit, he turned away. That's important. That we note. But these lunatic Republicans, forget it. And it means that no more Republicans, no more Republican presidents, no Republican must ever be president of the United States ever again. Imagine this unstable, narcissist, megalomaniac Trump in an international crisis. We'll have more about Trump's family heritage. Trump's family heritage is summed up in one word: pimp. Pimp. That was his grandfather, Friedrich Trump. Yeah, Herr Trump came over, right? So the polyadler tradition, right? The people who know that a house is not a home, that's Trump. So here's what we want to do. We're working out the details. You've got to watch my Twitter feed. You should watch it anyway, but now watch it with a special attention. Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed about a demonstration near United Nations headquarters. We'll see where it's going to be done. All the details will be on tarpley.net. I'll make sure that we put that stuff up day by day with items, and in particular, the Twitter feed. And now I'm so happy to announce we're going great guns on Facebook, so we'll have that stuff up on Facebook as well. One important sign, if you want to start making your sign, this is a suggestion from some very fine people in Moscow and in Donetsk. They say, why don't you have a sign that just says, Putin the peacemaker? Because it's true. He did. All of these, blind gnomes here in the West they were salivating about how they were going to bomb Syria. Now, and again, we want to give due credit to the Obama administration and to Kerry, indeed, that we've now got the U.S.-Russian military talks, right? So that should be a coordination of how to clobber ISIS. Now, Robert Parry, the journalist that many of us got to know during Iran-Contra, when he did, no doubt, some good work, maybe not as radical as, say, me, but still, yeoman service from Robert Parry. His sources are telling him that Obama approved in advance that Russia would send these, in reality, relatively modest military units, right? It's not an overwhelming force, but it's more than enough to deal with a bunch of ragtag, completely disorganized guerrilla fighters, mainly butchers, right? Mainly, the specialty of ISIS is not fighting pitched battles against equally matched military forces. It's killing women and children, killing civilians, old men. That's their speed. But anyway, Obama approved in advance, in cahoots with Putin, I think, the idea that Russia would put these forces in there. And according to Parry, it may even be that Obama encouraged Putin to do it, prodded him to do it, because the only way to stop this tragedy, this catastrophe of the refugees, is to stop the war. And that doesn't mean get rid of ISIS. After that, there's Assad. It means getting rid of ISIS. Wipe out ISIS, wipe out Nusra, or neutralize them some other way, and then you'll have peace. So Parry says Obama approved and prodded Putin about the idea of this base in the Latakia area. Now, we noticed that in public, there's a dog and pony show going on, and that's even part of the report from Parry. In other words, in public, Obama is actually saying, I refuse to meet with Putin. And Putin is saying, you better meet with me. And Obama says, no, I won't. Now, could this possibly be a dog and pony show? Could this be an agreed-on farce between these two leaders in order to get things done so that they can take less flack from the domestic political opponent? Certainly it's helping Obama. I think it may be helping Putin too. In other words, it's good to be seen as, jabbing, punching a little bit on the eve of such a gathering. Now, these are the principal things. We'll